hora de albergar esa movilidad del futuro. Nos acompaña Andreas Tschiesner, es Senior Partner en Mckinsey. Andreas, thank you so much for having us.
Marta, thanks for having me. It's a big pleasure.
The automotive and mobility industries have certainly been among the hardest hit during the sanitary crisis, the pandemic, but there are still some uncertainties. We have now on the table the supply chain crisis, of course, and we wonder how long full recovery may take, what the future of the sector could look like, and which are, of course, the main challenges right now. Starting with the current situation, let's take a global picture. Is mobility picking up?
I think, Marta, it's a very good question. And I think mobility at this point of time is probably what we say, facing a perfect storm. We have a large strategic transformation on one side with the shift to zero-emission cars, which is in full swing. The next big technological revolution, autonomous driving, just around the corner, where we also will see a lot of progress in the next couple of years. And the cars become more of a mobile device, being connected, offering many more solutions and services for customers than before. And at the same time, as you have pointed rightly out, we are facing a number of crises, starting with the semiconductor delivery shortages that every OEM and every supplier is dealing with, up to all the uncertainties in the supply chains, raw material price increases, and obviously, sadly, also the war in Ukraine causing additional crisis. As one executive of a large OEM has put it, it's basically crises stepping on each other. But I think at the end of the day, consumers will see a large progress and a large advancements of mobility solutions going forward. So it is also very exciting days.
You described this situation as a perfect storm. You mentioned we have a number of crises, the pandemic, supply chain crisis. Because of that, the war in Ukraine, which are, concerning this scenario, the main challenges.
I think the immediate challenge for all of the executives working in the mobility industry is obviously keeping the supply chain running. So a lot of time is now spent on operative problems. Do we get the materials? Do we get the parts that we need? And basically everyone in the industry is shifting around. So that's, I would say, half of the work week is somehow spent on making sure that sales are happening, production is happening, and we do see that millions of cars could not be produced last year. And I think that semicon and supply chain crisis will endure and will also keep us busy the next 18-24 months to come. And at the same time, it is shifting resources from traditional investments, from traditional combustion engines into new EV platforms, into new technologies. So making sure that the entire industry is shifting to new value pools, that's the second part of the challenge. And I think that's the very strategic outlook. And so for everyone, it's a little bit uncertain how our consumers really reacting to that. And many of the challenges are beyond the boundaries of the industry. So the industry has basically shifted into investing into electric vehicles. And I think that trend is clear, and we will all be facing new, very exciting products. On the other hand, it obviously takes a charging infrastructure to be erected, and that is not something that industry can do themselves. And I think that's also interesting here at the Global Mobility Call, that we see this ecosystem between the regulatory forces at national and city and district level, with the industry, with the entrepreneurs, and making sure that mobility really becomes a solution. So we're also seeing a shift from a predominantly product-based industry to a much stronger solution and platform-based industry.
And that's why we are here to start this conversation. Well, now we have increasing inflation and, of course, increasing prices in utilities. All of this is hitting this industry, this sector. And how do you observe the evolution of interest in vehicles, in electric vehicles? How is evolving global demand right now?
I think the current situation actually even further stimulating the shift and the advanced transition into zero-emission mobility for a couple of reasons. First of all, obviously, we all became very much aware of the dependency of fossil fuels. And I think societies across the globe are thinking about getting less dependent from fossil fuels. I think the crisis and the war has probably been the final drop that everyone fully understands that this is a difficult situation. So if we are able to differentiate and fuel up our cars with different forms of energy, I think that's an advantage. Second of all, with the increase of fuel prices, the total cost of ownership of a fuel-powered car versus an electric car also shifts. So we actually see that electric vehicles become more cost competitive with the increase of the fuels on the other side, and thereby also for very cost-conscious consumers, also that shift happens even faster now. And thirdly, I think the whole discussion will also stimulate the development of renewable energy, being it solar, where obviously Spain, and wind, very important, also green hydrogen, which is a third factor of renewable energy sources. And I think also that is now much more focus. We see huge investment programs from the EU, from the different national governments, and I think also that will actually further increase and speed up the transition into that new mobility. And at the end, mobility will be sustainable. I think that's something that all of us want, and it will also help the climate, and it will also help the political situation.
Of course, and are you seeing differences between the consciousness of consumers if we talk about countries?
Yeah, obviously, and that is often dependent also very much from the level of the charging infrastructure. So in countries where a lot has already happened in the build-up of the infrastructure, the Scandinavian countries, for example, the Netherlands, Spain in certain parts, then we do see that consumers are having a very positive side to that. And we obviously also see a little bit of a dependency from where do you live. In cities, in urban places, where the typical commute is not that long, an electric vehicle is obviously easier to fit into the mobility needs of consumers, and is often in the rural side where maybe you have 60, 70 kilometers commute every day one way, so that people are more conscious of the range. But also what we see is when we do survey with those consumers, the range anxiety is one of the first hurdles when buying an electric car. It is no longer after owning it for 6 or 7 or 8 months. So that disappears. So if we are able to keep up with the infrastructure investment, then I think the success of the electric vehicles will also get to other segments. And as I said before, obviously for very cost-conscious consumers, that part, if we have only a certain percentage of your wallet size that goes to mobility, then the total cost of ownership is very important. But as we see a slow shift towards competitiveness of electric vehicles, also that segment is actually more open to accepting electric vehicles.
And which role should governments and institutions play to boost all these new mobility ways?
Yeah, I think at the beginning they have very often incentivized ownership of electric vehicles. There were subsidy programs. As one, again, a CEO of a large auto company said, well, he said we should pull out of that because the vehicles and the products are so attractive, that money should be fueled into the infrastructure ramp up. And I fully agree with that. I think now is the time where we need to show the consumers that, yes, if you have an electric vehicle, there will be charging opportunities. You will not be stranded somewhere and waiting for an hour in line to get your vehicle charged up. I think that's very, very important. And I think it's also making that platform between investors, the industry, the consumers. So I think also a lot of platform building, which I think also this event here is a fantastic step into that direction of bringing the different stakeholders together and making sure that we are moving in a synchronized way.
Well, thank you so much, Andreas, for having us a few minutes. It's been a pleasure to have this conversation and remark the importance of being here in the Global Mobility Call. Thank you so much.
Martha, thank you so much for having me. Really a pleasure.
Nosotros nos quedamos, por tanto, con estas claves.